Hi, everyone. Welcome back for the second part of Chapter 2. So in this lecture, we're going to talk about management and leadership. In the last class, we talked about organizations and how organizations are structured and everything, how we have different types of organizations and how all organizations have certain characteristics. And we talked about each of those characteristics. What we're going to talk about today is the idea of management and leadership. You cannot have an organization, we said, without members, and members included leaders and members. So we're going to talk about leaders and what kind of leaders do we need to make our organization successful. So that's what we're going to focus on today. So let me share the PowerPoint with you. Okay. So it's just a little quote. Good management is the art of making problems so interesting and their solutions so constructive that everyone wants to get to work and deal with them. So that's one of the things that we're going to talk about with management and leadership motivation. So all of the things that go into making somebody a good manager or leader of their organization. Now, when we talk about managers, who are we actually talking about? Individuals working in an organization that direct and oversee other people. So in this context, we're kind of lumping administrators and managers together. We're kind of using that concept to talk about the higher people within the organization that actually have the decision-making process and that oversee other people and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Okay, so that's kind of what we're referring to. Now, when we talk about management, there are 4 different management styles that have been described. So we talked about organizations and types of organizations. These are different management styles, different ways that people go about managing, being a leader or manager of an organization. So the scientific management, human relations management, systems management, and bureaucratic management. So the first one we're going to talk about is scientific management. Scientific management is the thought that they are primarily concerned with efficiency and output. So when you operate under this management style, you are trying to get the most out of your employees with the least amount of effort, I guess. So you want them to be super efficient and create the most output. So input and output end up being your 2 key concerns. Now, when you're talking about scientific management, a lot of times this goes along with money and money-centered. So if you're a profit organization, a business, something like that, you want to get the most money with putting the least in, right? Because you want to maximize your profits. That tends to be more of a scientific management. So you're not necessarily considering certain personal issues or things revolving around your employees. You're really just looking at spreadsheets and profitability and how profitable are you. So that's more of a scientific management approach. The next one is what we call human relations management. Human relations management really grew off of the negative part of scientific management. People thought that was too cold, only worrying about profits all the time. So they thought that, you know what, we really need to focus on the individuals, the employees that work on it for us. So it became a much more employee-centered thing. And it's the idea that you need to instill pride and dignity in the people that work for you. Because if you do that, it's going to move them towards being more productive. But we're not going to solely look at productivity. We're not going to look at solely profits. We want to look at things on how happy they are in their job and how much they take pride in what they do. So it's a much more employee-centered and a little bit away from profit-centered. Another management style is what we call systems management. System management kind of tried to take the 2 that already existed, scientific and human, and kind of merge them into a new system. So it kind of puts them together. So they believe that if you do the human relations management and you care about your employees, that they are going to increase their efficiency, which will ultimately increase productivity. So that's what system management looks at. It kind of thinks that if you combine both of those, you can have the benefit of worrying about profits, but you achieve that by combining the 2 and really focusing on teamwork, cooperation, and getting people to work together to increase that productivity. Instead of you setting down edicts to improve productivity, if you involve the employees into that process for teamwork, then you're much more likely to increase productivity. And then the last one we're going to talk about is a bureaucratic management. Now, remember, a bureaucracy is a very large structured organization and lots of people. So if you're part of bureaucratic management, the idea is that you need to break that huge bureaucratic organization down into smaller, workable, functioning groups. And then each small functioning group can choose their management style within it. But you can't operate a huge bureaucratic organization all at once. You have to break it down first into small functional groups for it to be efficient, and then you can choose your management style. So now that we understand the difference, we have these leaders and they can choose the management style. How are they going to manage the organization that they work in? Now, I want us to look at the actual top executive or manager of an organization. So what do we generally call the top executive or manager of an organization? And in the business world, we call them the CEOs. The CEOs is the Chief Executive Officer, and they are the ones in charge of the whole organization. We use the term CEO mostly when we're talking about businesses, the business organizations, but you can think of CEOs along the line of the criminal justice system in a way. We just call them different things. If you're the sheriff, you're the CEO. If you're the chief of police, you're sort of the CEO. So it kind of, you may still have a boss, the county legislature, but it's still kind of you're in charge of that organization. Okay, so we're talking about the top person in that organization. Now, when you're talking about CEOs or the chief person of that organization, they have lots and lots of duties. They have lots and lots of responsibilities, okay? So this Mintzberg looked at all those responsibilities and said, you know what? We can break down CEO responsibilities into 3 primary roles. And all the jobs they do can fit into these 3 primary roles. The first one is the interpersonal role. The interpersonal role is the idea that if you are the CEO or the chief administrator, one of your sole responsibilities is to be the figurehead for that organization, right? So you're the face of the organization since you're the leader. So you would do things like ceremonial functions like parades or speaking engagements or university classes or visits to dignitaries, things like that. So that is part of the interpersonal role. You also have a leadership role where you need to be the motivator for your organization. So you need to motivate people to work. You need to motivate the boards that you work for to move certain ways. You need to win over the public into your things. And then the last thing is liaison duties. You want to act as the liaison between your organization and other organizations. So we said how criminal justice is so interconnected, whether it's a system or a network. So if you're the CEO of a criminal justice organization, you have to work with and act as the liaison to these other organizations and work with them to solve problems. Now that's all interpersonal role. There's also another role called the informational role. The information role means that you need to monitor and inspect the things that are going on in your organization. So you have to make sure that it's running smoothly, that everybody's working towards the mission, that the people aren't isolating themselves, that that the information is getting to where it needs to go. You're also the spokesman for the organization, so you need to disseminate information to the press or to the public or to the rest of the organization. You are the voice of the organization. And the third primary role is what we call the decision maker role. The decision maker role means that you are sort of the entrepreneur. You have to come up with new concepts and ideas for your agency. So we talked about planned change. You're the one that's going to initiate those planned change. That's sort of the entrepreneur of new ideas and new policies that could be implemented. Under this decision maker role, you're also going to be the disturbance handler. So if there's problems or anything going on between employees or anything like that, you're going to have to work those out and work with them to solve problems. You're the resource allocator. So you are the one that creates the budget and has to allocate the funds for your organization. And then you're going to be the negotiator. So if there's union negotiations or conflicts or employee requests, you're going to have to negotiate out those things. So those would be the different roles that a CEO plays. Now, just to make sure you understand them, I have a list. So read through the list and decide which one you think each of them would be. The interpersonal role, the informational role, or the decision maker. So go through each and identify what you think is each, and start the video again and see if you got them right. So here you go. Hopefully you got them right. If you have any questions on any of them, let me know. Okay. But those are the three kind of roles that you can break down all CEOs into. Now, this is just a quote that somebody has once gave. I think it's really interesting and just want you to think about it. Managers operate on status quo. Leaders take risks. Managers are conformers. Leaders are reformers. Managers control, leaders empower. Managers supervise, leaders coach. Managers are efficient, leaders are effective. Managers are position-oriented, leaders are people-oriented. So I just really like this. I think it's really interesting to think of the difference between a manager and a leader. And if you become a head of an organization, you'll ultimately have to make that decision. Are you just going to be a manager, or are you going to really take a leadership position within your organization? Now, since we're talking about leadership, let's talk about what would make somebody a good leader. Let's think about the factors that make somebody a good leader. Well, there's different theories of why people are good leaders. So we're going to talk about a few of these theories of what makes somebody a good leader. The first one is what we call trait leadership theory. This is the idea that people are good leaders just because they possess certain characteristics that poor leaders don't. So they're really looking at the traits of what makes somebody a good leader. So if you had to brainstorm in your head, what makes the best leader? You would come up with a list of traits. And then people that had those traits are going to be much more likely to be a good leader. And people that don't have those traits are not going to be good leaders, okay? So kind of think through, what do you think are the traits that make somebody a good leader? This is some of the traits that other people have researched and thought about of what makes a good leader. What are traits of a good leader? Adaptable to situations, alert to the social environment. They know what's going on around them and they're alert to it. Ambitious and achievement oriented. So they want to achieve and they want to move forward. Assertive, cooperative, decisive, dependable, dominant. So they don't want to just sit back and be a follower. They really want to influence others. Energetic, persistent, self-confident, tolerant to stress, and willing to assume responsibilities. They also have listed skills. You obviously want to be smart, creative, persuasive, and have social skills. So the idea with the traits theory is if you possess these characteristics, you're much more likely to be an effective leader. If you don't possess these characteristics, then you probably are not going to be a very strong leader. And that's kind of behind this traits theory. The next one is what we call style leadership theory. And this isn't dealing so much with what traits you possess. It's looking at what you do. How do you see your role as a leader? What do you think your role is as a leader? So there's three different, you can classify styles into three different styles. So the first one is autocratic. This means you're sort of an authoritarian. You just tell people what to do. It's more like direct. You do this, you do this, you do this, okay? Sometimes in emergency situations, this is what you need. You need people to take a much more autocratic, authoritarian approach. The problem is people may start to resent that they're always just being told what to do and aren't being allowed to participate in the decision making. And it also can stifle individual growth. So it doesn't allow people to grow into their own positions because they're just constantly being told what to do. The next one is the democratic leadership style. This is the idea that the belief that every decision should really be like a group decision. Everybody should work together, cooperate together in making leadership decisions. It shouldn't be a one-person show. It should be teamwork and everybody working together. It's consideration of other people, other people's ideas, encouraging participation, mutual respect for each other. Operates on the idea of trust and that everybody's going to do their fair share. It works best in organizations that where action is uncertain and problems can be solutions to problems can be constructed together in group work. The problem is getting groups of people all to agree on solutions can be difficult. So sometimes democratic leadership is difficult if you need to make fast choices and or you have different people that aren't willing to really commit to working together. The last one is laissez-faire leader. This is the idea that you just like hands off. You just sit back and you let the employees do what they want. You believe in their abilities. You believe that they can do it on their own. You don't need to be micromanaging them. You just kind of let them take over. It's a really difficult thing because you don't always have employees that are willing to put forth what they need. There's not a lot of control, and it tends to be one of the more unsuccessful leadership styles. So there's a little quiz, or not quiz, there's a little like survey that I posted. It's kind of interesting. If you go to the link, you can answer certain questions. And you can figure out what your own leadership style is. Which one of these styles do you fit best into? And it's really interesting. And I posted it. Okay. The next one is what we call situational leadership theory. This is sort of a little different. This is the idea that you kind of have to use a little of both depending on the situation. So the first idea is the task behavior. There are certain situations where you're just going to have to tell people what to do. And then other ones where you're going to balance those relationships and allow people to have a more active role in the decision-making process. Okay, so that's more of a situational theory, a situational leadership theory, where you have to kind of combine the two. When you talk about the situational leadership theory, it kind of includes three different things. Telling, there's times when you have to tell people what to do. Selling, you have to sell your decisions to them and get them to believe in what you're telling them to do and support it. Participating, you need to get them to participate in the process. And delegating, you have to be able to, at certain situations, not tell them what to do, but be willing to delegate situations to other people and allow them to work it out. Okay, so those are the three different, kind of management ways to look at what's the best way to manage people. One of the big things we know with management is the idea that you have to be able to motivate your employees. If you're going to be an effective leader, you need to get them behind what you're saying. You have to motivate them, getting people to work the way you want them to work, when you want them to work. You as a leader, to be effective, have to get people motivated. So there's lots of different ideas on what makes somebody, how do you motivate somebody? As a teacher, you spend your whole life trying to figure out, how am I going to motivate students? How do I get them to buy into what I'm telling? How do I get them to study and do their work and be excited about coming to class? What do you do to motivate people? There are different theories on how to motivate people. The first one is Maslow's theory. Maslow's theory is that people are solely motivated by human needs, right? That everybody has a certain level of human needs and they're going to be motivated just to achieve those certain needs, right? So certain people are going to be motivated just because they need basic life-sustaining survival needs. They need food, they need water, they need shelter. They need air. So you're going to be motivated to get those things because you can't survive without them. And then once you have those You're going to be motivated to the next level, which is safety. You want personal safety and security from danger and from crime. So you're going to be motivated to achieve so you can give yourself some safety. And then the next level, if you have the physiological needs and you have the safety needs, then you can start thinking about belonging and love. People have the need to belong, have friendships, have social contacts, to love other people. So if they have their basic needs sustained, they're going to move into the need for belonging and love. Then when you have that, you can move into the need to have some self-esteem in yourself and believe in yourself. And then the last one is that you want to achieve self-fulfillment, creativity, belonging to something. So then you get to self-actualization. And you always have the need to achieve a little bit higher, a little bit higher. Okay, so that's Maslow's hierarchy. That's one way that people look at ways to motivate. Another way that leaders sometimes motivate is what we call the Mcgregor's theory. And this breaks down into two theories. Some people believe in theory X, that people inherently hate to work, and they're always going to do the least amount possible that they have to do. They'll do as little as possible. So the best way to motivate people is to use negative reinforcement and threats and things like that. Because if you use that, then maybe you can motivate them to achieve, because they're not going to do it on their own. So the only way to motivate them is to use negative reinforcement. The other flip of that is what we call the why theory. The why theory is the idea that people do love to work. They want to work. They're motivated to work. And the best way to motivate them is to provide them rewards and increase responsibility when they do a good job. So if they love what they're doing, they're working really hard, then maybe they get a higher pay. Maybe they get more responsibility. Maybe they get a day off. Maybe they get some other benefits. And the idea is that that is probably the best way to motivate them. Now, OGZ theory kind of took the why theory and emphasized more of allowing more participatory decision making. So people love to work, let's do positive reinforcement. And one of the ways we're going to positively reinforce you is by giving you more decision making. We're going to give you the ability to have more discretion, make more choices, kind of be more independent. So that's the OGZ theory, that independence, that decision making, the discretion makes people like their job more when they feel like they have some more additional freedom. And then the next one is what we call Herzberg's motivation. Herzberg's motivation is that employees need two things in order to be motivated. First, you have to meet their basic needs. So it's kind of like Maslow. First, you have to meet basic needs. Hygiene, you have to provide them with the basic things they need to survive. Okay, so you have to worry about adequate pay, benefits, security, decent work conditions, and interpersonal relations. Those are the baseline. So the first thing to motivate people is provide them with that baseline. And then on top of that, once you can provide them with their baseline, then you can move into more motivational factors such as achievement, recognition, independence, responsibility, growth. So you have to kind of combine the two. First, you have to meet their essential needs, and then you can move into higher levels of motivational factors. Okay, last one. The last one is the idea of expectancy theory. The only way that you're really going to be able to motivate employees is if you give them a belief that they can achieve and they can perform and they can grow. Okay, so expectancy theory is the idea that if you feel like no matter what you do, you're never going to succeed, you're probably not going to be very motivated to try, right? So in order to motivate people, we have to give them the belief that they are actually going to be successful. So they have to believe that the task is possible. They have to be given the opportunity to achieve. They have to desire the reward that's being offered if they do achieve it. They have to believe the tasks that they are performing are going to lead to that achievement. They're not going to be useless tasks. They're actually going to lead to the achievement. And they have to kind of build off of that idea that the better they perform, the more hard they work, the greater the reward will be at the end. So that's expectancy theory. We have to motivate people to believe in what they're doing, and they have the ability to do it. Okay, so those are the main theories of motivation. So we want to think about which one do you think works the best? And then this is just an article that somebody wrote that talks about these are what makes a good leader. So just the best leaders of an organization. So just think about it. Good in their skin, know who they are. So self-confident, they're proud of what they are. They bring people together and empower them through motivation, some of the things we just talked about. They know their true north and their moral compass. They're not wishy-washy. They're willing to stay to their true north. They're persistent. They have grit. They stay even though that they are facing challenges. They are concerned with others and serving others. It's not just me, 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 me. You worry about others and how you can give back to others. You have passion. You lead with your heart. You really love what you do. And you have self-discipline. You're willing to defer gratification sometimes if that's the best for your organization. So that's what makes America's best leaders. Now, the last concept that we'll talk about real quick is what we call motivating Generation Y. So one of the big issues in organizations right now is how do we motivate the younger generations to be successful and want to grow in their profession? So we're talking about what we call millennials. So if you think about what do you think makes the characteristics of millennial Generation Y, which is really kind of your guys' generation. The studies show that these are some of the general characteristics of Y generation. Born between 1980 and 2000, they've had a lot of emphasis over their life from their parents on self-esteem. We don't want losers. Everybody's a winner. Everybody gets a trophy. Everybody should make decisions as a team. It should all be teamwork, working together. The idea that you really work to live, not to live to work. So that the idea is you want free time, you want social life, you want to work hard when you're at work, but you also don't want to work all the time. You don't want to give up your whole life for work. Work doesn't necessarily define them. Sometimes it's just a means to an end. They're willing to work to achieve what they want, but they're not so excited about work that it's everything that they do. And they want immediate fulfillment. They often are unwilling to put aside instant gratification. They want what they want now, and sometimes they're not willing to climb the ladder and work. So it's interesting, that may fit some of you. What do you think about that? Do you think you fit in that characteristics? Do you think that you fit into that generation? So we've had a lot of questions. How do we deal with this? Because it's kind of completely changed the work environment. Because before, everybody worked, no social life, you just work. And it's interesting, the pandemic has kind of changed that. More and more employees are realizing that maybe people need more time off. So some of the challenges that employers have to think about when they're talking about the new up and coming younger generations. How do we attract them? How do we get them into the job? So the first thing we have to think about is how do we reach them that we need jobs? Like you're not going to post in the newspaper anymore. People don't read newspapers. So how do you advertise that you need people? What's the best way to reach this generation and let them know there are jobs available? Training, when you provide training and teaching, it has to catch their attention and keep their attention. They're kind of a generation that has a short attention span to a lot of things, the way media and TV and everything, YouTube and Snapchat, everything's instant, short gratification. So if we're doing trainings for people, how do we keep their attention? How do we keep them involved in the process? How do we keep them in the workplace? How do we make them want to be there? If they're only working because they need to reach an end, how do we make it fun and flexible so that they do enjoy it when they're there and they're willing to give you their all? There is a lot of increase in body art. In the past, many criminal justice organizations said if you had any tattoos or anything like that, you could not join them. They're kind of starting to have to move away from some of those things. And it may not just be body art, it could be clothing, it could be hairstyles. And maybe you can't be as rigid on some of those things that we have been in the past. and technology. Younger generations want to integrate technology into their job. So how can we integrate technology and keep this generation interested in their job so they're willing to stay and work hard? So it's just interesting to think about. These are some of the challenges that true leaders and organizations have to face. And then just think about it yourself. What do you think? What do you think would be the best way to motivate this generation to work? So that's it. That's all I have for leadership and management. I know it was a lot of theories and styles and things like that. So you may want to follow your notes and keep them so you can keep track of everything and understand what I was saying with everything. So chapter 2. So chapter 2, assignment part 1, you did already when you assessed an organization. Now you need to work on part 2. You need to think about management style. Which style do you think is best? Which role is most important for a CEO when we talked about the Herzberg model CEO roles. If you were hiring a CEO, which leadership theory do you think would be best used to choose a leader? And what theory do you think is the best way to motivate employees? So make sure you're using the notes, the terms, the concepts from the class into your answer. You need to show me that you understand the distinctions between these different theories and you can apply them in these situations. Okay? So that's the second part, and then you'll be done with chapter 2 assignment. So that's the end. We have one more part we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about communications next, and then we'll finally be done with chapter 2. So thanks for listening, and I will see you soon.